What's going on, adventurers? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Adventure One podcast. Now, right now is that weird gap in the air where it's not really any hunting season. Fishing is good in some places, but man, it has just been so rainy that I haven't gotten a chance to go out and fish. I've done a little bit of hiking, but in general, we're kind of in a weird gap. Now, I know turkey season has started in a couple places, so I bet you folks down in Florida are super excited, but it hasn't quite hit here yet. So I wanted to talk about something a little different today, and something that may be really applicable to those of you who are stuck at home doing chores or working from home in this COVID-19 scare in this pandemic. Now, I do think a lot of people are really worried and really scared, and I want to just urge you, don't be worried, don't be scared, but do be prepared in any way you can, and just be responsible and think, how can I make my small world a better place and make it a better place for other people? But I think a lot of people right now, more than anything, are just stir crazy, not being able to go out and about. So this is something that I had kind of planned and had gotten started on from a DIY project perspective way before all this COVID stuff was circulating, and I just think it's even more valuable now. So on this channel, I spend a lot of my time talking about hunting, camping, fishing, that kind of stuff, but I also do a fair amount of DIY projects. Now, a lot of them are related to that other stuff, like upgrading your turkey gun, tips to do that, or maybe some truck upgrades, stuff like that. But this one is a DIY project that is a little bit different. Today, we're going to be talking about the concept of a victory garden. So if you are not already familiar with the term, a victory garden is just a personal fruit and vegetable garden. And this term really comes from World War I a little bit, but mostly World War II, where food supplies were running short, where there were just a lot of needs for sending supplies, meat, vegetables, everything else over to Europe. And our industry was really strained to be able to do that. So people were encouraged to grow their own food. And it's really interesting because this was most prominent, I think it was a little bit in Canada, but most prominent in the UK and in the United States. And in the UK, it was really a necessity to have your small backyard garden. A lot of people living in the city without a lot of space, but still found ways to have this little bitty backyard garden. And that was really important because people in London were actually going through rationing. Now, in the U.S., it was a little bit different. I think there were some places where rations were implemented, but mostly it was a sign of patriotism. It was a sign of, hey, I'm not going to dip into the food supply because I'm sending that to the troops. And I think that's pretty interesting how people united around that cause or that idea as a method of patriotism. But ultimately, it was something that just made things a lot better for individuals. Now, this is something I talked about a little bit in a couple episodes back, an episode called Where Does Your Meat Come From? But the more you can source things yourself, it just alleviates the strain on the supply chain. And it makes you a little bit more self-sufficient in having things when you need them rather than relying on others or relying on just the general state of the economy. Hunting and fishing are obviously great examples of this, but the concept of a victory garden does the exact same thing. And in fact, it may be more of a small, slow, and steady implementation of this idea compared to something like hunting or fishing that's a little bit more of a boom and bust. Most companies these days strive to be incredibly efficient, to not maintain more overhead than is required, to just not have excess or waste, to operate on lean margins so that they can provide great deals to their customers, and to not have idle inventory sitting around. They want to build product up and sell it and just move as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And in some ways, that's been great for a lot of modern businesses. But it also has a dangerous side effect that it makes us less able to react to surge demand because we don't have adequate supply to tap into. Now, what if you completely disagree with this idea and you go all out and you want to be as prepared as possible and you just stockpile everything? That's great, but in a way, you're still subject to kind of the rest of the economy in terms of acquiring those things. Because businesses and distributors operate that way, as consumers, we're at the bottom of the line on the effect of those decisions. So in a way, we have to kind of deal with those mentalities to even get products. But you can start stockpiling things, especially if you do so slowly and gradually, to be a little bit more prepared. If you try to stock up all at once, well, you're just putting more strain on this lean industry that does not do that very well. So a gradual approach to stocking up is always better. But today we're not really talking about stocking up as much as just the challenge of maybe self-sourcing some of your own food supply through the creation of a victory garden. Now, I am definitely not a gardening expert. I do not consider myself having a green thumb. I can plant some things and make some things grow, but I barely know what I'm doing. I'm making it work, but I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I just think the concept is a really intriguing one that we should explore. And right now, when a lot of people kind of need projects to do around the house, and this is a particularly valuable one, it's a great project and discussion to explore together. One of the things that got me into a small patio garden concept was really just a desire to eat a little bit more healthfully. So for me, one of my biggest challenges in terms of having good, healthy nutrition and not just eating fast food and junk is the discipline aspect of it. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's not that I don't know the difference between what's healthy and what's not. It's just making sure that I have healthy food readily available that I'm encouraging myself to eat. And so I realized every time I had to go to the grocery store to specifically choose healthy foods over junk food, it was a chance to screw that up. And not saying junk food like candy and soda, but maybe just things that aren't as healthy. It was a chance to mess that up. So my thought was, well, if I could have this at home, basically on tap, ready to go, it's going to make those decisions easier. And yeah, it doesn't create the discipline for me, but it makes it harder for me to screw up or easier for me to choose the right thing. So I started looking into planting healthy things that I would actually eat so that I would have them ready to go at home. Another big advantage of this is when you go to the grocery store and you buy a bunch of bananas or you buy produce of any kind, sometimes you can buy in the quantities you want, but sometimes you can't buy it by pound. You have to buy it as it's packaged or bagged up. And so with that, there's a chance that you buy a bunch of stuff and you bring it home, put it in the crisper drawer in your fridge, and it sits there and it spoils. And maybe you only eat half of it and the other half goes bad. Or you have something sitting on your counter and it starts to gradually not be so good, not be so fresh anymore. So with having a garden, you can kind of harvest stuff in real time. And I think this is important in the difference between farming and an easy access, small scale garden. This isn't, going out to do a harvest and gather everything all at once. This is a kind of pick it as you need it sort of deal. And I think having fruits and vegetables on tap and ready to go is also valuable from just you now have some efficiency and that you don't have waste. You're not buying vegetables that are going to go bad. You're just picking what you want when you want it. So a victory garden or a small-scale home garden can be built in numerous ways. If you've got a lot of space in your backyard, well, congrats, because you have the easiest place to do it. Now, you'll need to see what quality soil you have. If it's all rocky, it may be kind of difficult. If it's all clay, like much of North Texas, that may be kind of difficult. But there are things like composting or buying topsoil that can help you out. Now, I do not have a big backyard that I can use for gardening. I basically have a townhome-style apartment balcony, and that required me to be as space efficient as possible when I was looking at doing something like this. And also, unlike a backyard, I can't just go dig it up in the ground. It meant I was going to have to use some sort of box or planter or something like that. So if you're doing this in your yard, you can, dig straight in the ground, but you can also build a planter if you want to contain things a little bit better, or if your soil's not good and you just want to have a planter that has high quality topsoil in it, then building a planter is a good way to go. So I knew I was going to have to do something like that for my own victory garden. So I ended up building 2 garden boxes on my patio. So I measured the space I wanted to use, and then I just went to Lowe's and I just bought a bunch of cedar fencing and cut it up. And I'm basically using 1x6 fence picket boards and using I think they're 2x3, the runners. I use those for the corners of the boxes just to have, a piece to tie everything into. I built boxes that were 48 inches by 12 inches wide by, I think it was just under 18 inches tall. It was whatever it worked out to be with the boards. So it ended up being, 16 and a half or whatever. So the reasons I went with cedar are a couple. So one, it's readily available. I just use regular fencing material. And so you can find that all over the place. It's very affordable. It's easy to cut, easy to work with. I also didn't need anything particularly strong. This is going to be a box that pretty much just sits still, and it holds less than 100 pounds of dirt, and it doesn't really move around. So I didn't need to overbuild it. Simple was just fine. Cedar is also naturally resistant against bugs and rot, and so that makes it a very good choice for something that's going to be containing a lot of food-bearing plants and a lot of moisture in a place that could naturally attract bugs or rot or anything like that. It made cedar a great option. So I spent about an hour, maybe an hour and a half with my chop saw, a hammer, and some nails, and I was able to build these boxes for probably about $30 each. And then I took some old contractor trash bags. I cut the sides open to basically make a small plastic sheet. I could have gone out and bought a piece of Tyvek or something like that, but I already had these and I didn't need a thick plastic. All I wanted was something to just catch the moisture so it didn't drain straight through the cracks in the boards. So I ended up lining the insides about halfway up with these stretched out trash bags, just stapling that from the inside out to hold it in place to serve as a moisture barrier. So then I went to the hardware store and got pretty much everything else I need for this project. So I just ended up filling these with just regular premium garden soil, just topsoil purchased from Lowe's specifically for gardening and growing fruits and vegetables. Now, if you're into composting or you have a place where you can dig up your own garden soil, congrats. It's even easier than what I'm doing. This was just a way that I could get what I needed and make it work in my balcony garden boxes where I can't just dig in the dirt and put something in there. So I got the garden soil, put that in, and then I started planting. So right off the bat, I kind of had the choice of plants versus seeds. So I went with plants, young plants, probably 3 to 4 inches tall, just because they were still pretty cheap, not as cheap as seeds, but it was much easier. I'm not an expert gardener, so it was a way that I could do this, have somebody who's done the time-consuming part and the slightly trickier part already taken care of. I can just drop these in the dirt and be ready to go. So I got the plants all set in there overnight. I was working pretty late on this one night just after work, got them all set up and watered them, and it was pretty much as easy as that. So in my garden box, what did I plant? So I did 2 separate boxes. I talk about them like I did them at the same time, but actually I did one night and one the next night after I realized I needed more space. So in one box, I have lettuce, I have spinach, I have yellow onions, and I have cilantro. And I was a little bit nervous about the greens, about the lettuce and the spinach, because it gets really hot in North Texas, and I was hesitant about how well those would do. So I think they're not going to be good long-term options. But right now, when it's still cool, it's in the low 50s at night and usually hits about 70 during the day. The lettuce and spinach are growing like crazy. And so I'm really excited about how well they've done. So now I'm actually at the place where I need to start picking leaves and eating them just because otherwise they're going to crowd each other out and things are going to start dying just because it doesn't have enough room. So I've got those. I've got the onions packed in there pretty crowded too. So I think I'm going to have to start picking some of those and eating some smaller yellow onions just so that I have room to grow bigger ones. So that's something kind of in hindsight, I wish I had spaced those out a little bit better. I built the boxes based on the available space I thought I had. I could have gone a little bit bigger, and I probably should have, but I'm learning through this whole thing. So that's another lesson, that if you have more space available, use it. Spacing things out will definitely help you quite a bit. So that's the lettuce, the spinach, the yellow onions, and then I have cilantro. Living in North Texas, I eat a lot of Tex-Mex because it is amazing. So having fresh cilantro on hand, ready to go for tacos or pico de gallo or anything like that is great, because that's the sort of thing, yeah, it's cheap, it's easy to get at the store, but you have to go out and get it. Now I can just pick a small little bit, exactly what I need it, and man, it's going to be fresh and it's going to be so good. In the next box, I have rosemary. So I think rosemary is going to grow a little bit slower than some of these other greens and vegetables, but that's one that I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to screw up. Rosemary is a very hardy plant, and it's got a lot of strong flavor too, so I'm not going to be picking huge amounts of it. I really like cooking rosemary potatoes, so it's really easy when I'm doing this. I don't use a lot of rosemary at a time because the flavor is so strong that I can just go out there and just grab a couple sprigs just when I need them and not have to go to the grocery store and buy some just when I want to cook up one batch of potatoes. So that rosemary is probably going to be great all summer in Texas, and I think rosemary is actually a perennial. Again, I don't know too much about this, but I think year to year I don't have to replant it. I think it'll keep going strong. So on the other side of that box, I planted some strawberries. And in hindsight, this may not make as much sense because strawberries will need a lot of water, but rosemary won't. So maybe I should have separated those into two different containers or boxes. Now I'm just trying to be a little bit careful about how I water things, and so far it's working. But I love fresh strawberries. Just in the summer, they are so delicious, and it is something that grows well in the hot weather we have here. So that's the one that I'm least confident in, but I'm probably most excited about. So far, the strawberries are just starting to flower, and those flowers are eventually where the strawberries will grow. So I really don't know how much yield I'm going to get from just a couple strawberry plants, but I'm hopeful that it will turn out well. So that's just what I've got in my own personal victory garden. You may love all the things I've mentioned, or you may hate half of these. And I think plant what you're going to eat. Don't plant something just because somebody says, yeah, you can plant that, it's easy to grow. But I think that is valuable feedback. Of the things that you will eat, do look for things that are easier to grow. I think people get excited about a lot of the really interesting or exciting fruits and vegetables, like growing tomatoes or watermelons or stuff like that. But, you know, that may be quite a bit trickier than something like rosemary or cilantro that are very easy to grow and very forgiving. So I think if the whole purpose of this is just to have kind of this hobby, you're starting something new, start easy. Start with something you're going to use, and start with something that you're less likely to screw up. And then, like me, as you get more into it, you'll learn more and want to get into more things when you have the easy things going strong. So that's at least my perspective. I may be way off. Ask an expert, but I imagine they would probably agree. I think it's generally a good philosophy in life to work out the smaller problems first, quickly, so that you have more capacity to solve the bigger, greater challenges once you have a little bit more experience and information behind you. And also, as I mentioned, you have the choice of starting from seeds or from starting from small plants. I think starting from seeds could be really exciting, but I didn't allow enough time to be able to do that. So definitely, if you have time and you can devote careful attention to this, that's a cheaper and easier way, and probably a more sustainable way to get into this. Now remember, you also can save some of the seeds from fruits and vegetables that you buy in the grocery store. Now, you got to be a little bit careful because the stuff you buy in the grocery store is mostly not native stuff. So, yeah, if you happen to live in Michigan and you're buying apple seeds up there, great, they'll grow, but they're probably not going to grow down here in Texas. So be a little bit careful based on what you buy in the store and what you're trying to plant, and make sure that those two ideas are actually consistent and will work together. One thing that I may try, I have an old potato actually sitting on my counter that I had bought potatoes to cook something a while back and didn't cook them all. And there's this one sitting there and it's kind of been sitting in a dark corner on the kitchen counter, and the eyes of the potato are just starting to get little buds on them. So I may actually chop up that potato and grow that in the garden, because I think potatoes will grow really well down here, but I'm almost out of time. I know they need to be planted in cool weather. Probably should have planted them at the beginning of March. We're now almost at the end of March. So that's something that I would need to get on probably later this week, and I'll need a lot of space for potatoes, so I need to plant that in its own trough. But big picture, I'm just addressing this as a new challenge, a fun DIY project, and one that went from just a general concept of it'd be great to have veggies in the home and it'd be great to be more self-sufficient and to be more prepared, to one that now is so valuable. When I walked through the grocery store the other day, I walked down the produce section, and my thought was that there was still going to be a lot there, because people like stocking up on the ramen noodles and the rice and beans, but people don't really like eating their vegetables. And so I thought there was still going to be lots of produce there, but no, even that was totally cleaned out. I think the only thing that was left was sweet potatoes and jicama root. And I like sweet potatoes, but I don't really know how to cook anything with jicama. So this was just a good reminder that, hey, this concept of the victory garden, this is going to help get me through this, where I don't have to go to the store to get lettuce. I can still have lettuce. I can have incredibly fresh lettuce, better than anybody else, without having to go to the store. So it just works out really well timing-wise. And so if you're willing to brave the hardware store, you can do this project pretty much in an evening or in a couple evenings and get yourself up and running. So right now, people are panicking and freaking out and going to the grocery store and cleaning everything else out. Like I said, there's pretty much no produce left in a lot of grocery stores. Yet in front of just about every hardware store in America, there are plants just sitting there. Like, people aren't rushing on those. They're still there. And for most of these things, you can still plant them. It's not too late yet. So maybe we can address this as a chance to look back at our grandparents' and great-grandparents' generation and how they got through World War I and World War II by creating these victory gardens, and use it something as a fun project, a fun learning experience, but also a way that we can be more prepared, more self-sufficient, and generally just live and eat healthier. So that's kind of my introduction to the victory garden concept, and I'm looking forward to eating the food that I'm growing on my own balcony. And we're getting a lot of rain and a little bit of sunshine, so it's taken off like crazy. And so I think this is going to be an exciting project. So again, a little bit different from my normal episode content of hunting and camping and fishing and hiking and that kind of stuff, but it all goes together. I think eating healthy food, being prepared, it's just that mindset that makes us that much better and can make things just that much more sustainable going forward. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.